What's cool about Univah? Let's forget all the jargon and technical talk, and let's just communicate the differences between the Univah Film Engine and basically every other software, every other legacy DCC out there. And that includes Blender and Unreal. Because for some reason, we've noticed that when we talk about legacy DCCs, people seem to think Unreal Engine is exempt from that. And so we throw Unreal Engine in the same boat as Maya, Houdini, Blender, Cinema 4D. All of those softwares follow the same pattern. They were all made in the 90s. They all have node graphs. Unreal Engine has blueprints. Blender is highly reliant or dependent on the node graph workflow. So from Maya, which is very technical, to Houdini, which is extremely technical, to Blender, which is very technical, to Unreal Engine, which is extremely technical, all of them have the same thing in common. They are extremely dependent on plugins, external add-ons, and their architecture is deeply engulfed and dependent upon node graphs, the node graph workflow, which is the opposite of how an artist thinks. You work in Houdini and it feels like you're creating a spaceship. It feels like you're working in NASA, you're working on a rocket ship. And really all you're trying to do is change the color of an apple. You want to change the texture of an apple, and you go to Houdini to make an apple look like it was painted. And you have to do so many node graph setups, you have to do so much connections that it ends up feeling like you're building a rocket ship, like it's rocket science, like you have to get a PhD just to manage a node graph. That is the opposite of art. That is the opposite of how an artist thinks. It is unintuitive. Node graphs are not instinct. It is not your instinct to go to a node graph and connect a bunch of wires just so that your apple can look like it was painted or hand drawn. This is what all the legacy DCCs, and we're including Unreal Engine in here, all of them that were made in the 90s made the mistake of not thinking differently. All of them made in the 90s made the mistake of copying each other. One person did it this way, so the other companies just followed blindly. And nobody thought differently. And that's what always happens in the industry. Blender came out, but Blender was a, what do you call it? An in-house software. A lot of people don't know this. Blender was first and then Maya. People think Maya came first and that's why it dominated the industry. No, actually, Blender was around before Maya. But Blender was an in-house tool and very ugly. It was ugly. It was very, very ugly. Because it was an in-house tool. It was an indoor cat. It was made for a specific house. And then Blender became public. And it was still ugly. But as the years went by, it became less ugly. And now it's not so ugly. But it still has the same workflow that all the DCCs have. It claims to be real time, but if it's real time, and if Blender has solved the issue that Univah has solved, then why are people still using render farms? Why are people still building render farms? You can't claim you've solved an issue if people are still using offline rendering. Blender users are using offline rendering, and they're using render farms, and they're paying for cloud rendering, which proves the issue of real-time fidelity matching offline rendering in Blender has not happened. Blender has not solved it. So Blender is not real-time. It's not a true real-time tool. Univah is. Being a true real-time tool means you have absolutely no reliance on ray tracing. You have no reliance on anything that is offline based that would require having to use a render farm or cloud rendering in order to render faster. True real time means you see in the viewport the final pixel. And we can't stress this enough because we keep getting some people who are asking for final output. What does the final image look like? And it's like they're not getting it. And I don't blame them because no other software company is doing what we're doing. There is no software out there that is promoting this principle, that is prioritizing the principle of final pixel in the viewport. All your life as a CG artist, you've been working in Maya, which gave you a proxy, a very low quality proxy of what you were actually building. Because to show you the final pixel in the viewport would require a lot of resources. It would require a lot of hardware resources. So all your life as a CG artist, you've been working in the 3D animation industry for 30 years, 20 years, some of you 15 years, some of you 5 years. And you've been working in Houdini, which gave you a low quality proxy of what you were truly building. In the viewport, that's what you saw. The entire time you're working in Cinema 4D trying to create your motion graphics effect, you were not working with the final pixel, final quality in the viewport. You are not seeing the final quality of the motion graphics effect in the Cinema 4D viewport live in real time. Every time you added a light, you were not seeing the final quality of that light in the viewport and its shadows. You were not seeing that. You were not able to edit that live and see the live output, the immediate feedback, the final quality, immediate feedback of your lights immediately as you edit them. You were not getting that from Maya. You were not getting that from 2D Studio Max. You were not getting that from Houdini. You were not getting that from Cinema 4D. You just weren't getting that. And so that's what your mind understands. You understand that you have to add a light, tweak it, render it, wait, and then you see output. And what we're telling you is that we have created a gigantic shift in the industry. We've taken all those steps and combined it into one so that now you see the final quality. We're working with final pixel in the viewport live, eliminating the need to click a render button. And we can't stress this enough. So again, let me say this. In case you missed it, this is what the Univah Film Engine is. It's the new Apple. We are like the iPhone. When the iPhone was first revealed, people said, what the heck? No buttons? Why? Blackberry was like, why would anyone want a phone with no buttons? Well, why? That's dumb, you know. According to Blackberry CEO, the iPhone was a dumb idea. But today, everybody has a touchscreen. Today, everybody's scrolling up and down with their phones using their fingers. But we forget that it wasn't always this way. Before Steve Jobs, before Apple, we had plastic buttons on our phones. And we never had a giant big screen to watch our movies. It was half and half. Half was screen, the top half was a screen, and the bottom was plastic buttons. And we had to push and manually press these things. Apple and Steve Jobs came and said, why? Why do we always have buttons when we don't always need buttons? Why don't we only have buttons when we need buttons? And so Steve Jobs got rid of the buttons and made a giant screen. And some people at first were not impressed. That's always how it is with new groundbreaking technology. At first, some people are quiet and they claim they're not impressed. The Univah Film Engine has done exactly that in the software industry. A lot of you believe you need to have complicated, very difficult node graphs because that's what you've been taught. That's all you've known. A lot of you believe you don't have the ability to truly customize your workflow unless it's difficult and you have these gigantic, huge node graph setups that you have to hire a specific technical director to manage a huge, complicated node graph, because that's all you've known. All you know is this difficult 90s workflow. Nothing against the 90s. Of course, that's when I was born. I was born in 1990. Yeah, 1990. That's when I was born. And I came to America in 1999. So nothing against the 90s. I love the 90s. Okay. My first time in America was 1999. Before that, I was in Africa. I was born in Africa. So I love the 90s. I love the 80s even more than the 90s. Nothing against the time of old. Don't get me wrong. In my opinion, the movies made in the 80s and 90s were better than a lot of the movies made today. I watch more old films than I do new films. If I want to learn how to make a movie, I don't watch new movies. I watch old movies. If I want to improve my writing, my script writing, how I write a scene, because as you guys know, I am a filmmaker. I study old films. That's how I became a better filmmaker, not by studying visual effects. I studied The Matrix. I watched The Matrix over and over, and I learned how to write a film, a beginning, a middle, and an end. I studied TV shows like Death Note, which is an anime. I studied Death Note, and that show taught me how to structure a TV series because I wanted to start writing for television. And I watched Death Note over and over because it's such an intelligent anime, and I studied it so that I could learn how to write a beginning, middle, and end for television, a 22-minute show with commercial breaks. I studied that. So do not underestimate my ability to study something because when I want to learn, I know exactly what to study. Okay. So I want to make it very clear. There are things that are excellent, that are old, that were made in the 80s, which are superior to what we have now. And in my opinion, those are things like music. To be honest, I would rather listen to music from the 80s. I think music from the 80s, that was the golden age in music, 80s music. I love 80s music, and I love some of the music from the 50s, like the Frank Sinatra people. I love some of the James Brown stuff. To me, that's much more superior to the music we have today. But that's my opinion. I love 80s music, 90s music. I love music from the 50s. Some of the music from the 40s was really good too. So there are, in certain things, in certain ways, things that were made in the old days superior to today's time, to what we have today. In my opinion, a lot of the cars that were made in the 80s are superior. And I don't really think that's an opinion. I think that's a fact. The cars we have today, the Mercedes we have today, if you run into a pole, you get this giant dent in your car and all the airbags will deploy. Because the cars we have today are so weak. They're made with cheap materials. They're basically plastic pretending to be metal. But the cars, I remember I bought a 1999 Mercedes, cash. I found a guy on Craigslist. He was selling a Mercedes for $1,000. And I went there immediately. It was a black 1999 Mercedes. I bought it for $1,000. Actually, correction, I bought it for $700. He wanted $1,000, but I paid him $700 because one of the windows was messed up. And as you know, Mercedes, with everything Mercedes, it costs quite a lot to fix stuff. So I had to pay like $200 for the window. And so I deducted that expense and I ended up just saying, hey, I'll pay you $700 since the window's messed up and I have to fix the window. And so $700, and I walked away that same day with a 1999 Mercedes. Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. And do you know that Mercedes, I got hit from the back so many times when I was on the highway, driving on the highway, and I would get bumped in the back by another car. I can't tell you how many times I've been hit from the back, okay? I don't know why, but I just keep attracting people that want to hit me from the back. So I had so many accidents where people just hit me from the back. And do you know that even though that car was hit so many times, it barely got a scratch, barely got a dent because it was so well built. The cars back then were so strong. They were so well built that I could hit a pole. I could run into a pole and barely get a scratch, barely get a dent. Compare that to a lot of the cars I drive today. If I barely even back, if I make a mistake of backing into a pole, which I tend to do, if I make the mistake of backing into a pole or backing into a wall, or I get this giant dent in the car because the cars today are so weak. They're advanced in technology. Yes, you've got touchscreen in the cars now. You've got touchscreens in the cars now. You've got, what else do you have in the car? You have phones. You can Bluetooth your phone and connect it to your car now. You have GPS in your car now. Advanced in those ways, but they're less advanced in the materials that are being used to make the cars. They're not as strong as the cars in the 50s and the 80s and the 90s. The materials are getting cheaper and cheaper, weaker and weaker. Corners are getting cut. The quality is cheaper. So I say all of this to say, when you hear me talk about softwares that were made in the 90s, I don't want you to misunderstand my appreciation for what was superior in the 90s and the 80s. I believe music was superior in the 80s to what we have today. I believe cars were superior in the 80s to what we have today. No, they didn't have touchscreens back then. No, they didn't have Bluetooth connected to your car back then. No, they didn't have these things. But they were superior in materials. The cars were stronger, they were sturdier. They weren't so easily destroyed as the cars now. I believe the movies were more superior back then. The films that were made in the 80s and 90s were superior back then. In terms of quality, in terms of storyline, the quality of the writing, in my opinion, was superior back in the 80s, 90s, and the early year 2000s. So I have the ability to appreciate superiority no matter when it was created. And so I am objectively telling you that when it comes to legacy DCC, and we're throwing Unreal Engine into the mix, when it comes to legacy DCC, we have a serious problem. We do have a problem because from Maya, which I love, you know how much I love Autodesk. I am a hardcore Autodesk fan. I adore the Autodesk company. It is actually my secret hope to one day create software for them. I want to make software for Autodesk. It's also one of my secret hopes. I have it on my vision board to make software for Microsoft. I want to build an operating system for Microsoft. That's my future. I'm preparing for that now. I want to be someone who makes operating systems. So I want you guys to understand it. This is not just Univah. I'm not a one-off. This is not a one-hit wonder. I am a software developer. The Stephanie Michael Software Company makes software. We are going to make software that drives the future. We're going to be hired by big companies like Microsoft. We're going to be hired by Google. We're going to be hired by Apple. We are going to be hired by Autodesk. We are going to be hired by the biggest people, and we're going to make operating systems for them. We're going to make software. We're going to make DCCs, entire DCCs from scratch for them because they don't want to be bothered to do that. We're going to do that for them. That's what we exist for. That's why we created this company, not just to make Univah. Univah is one of the many softwares we're going to create. We are positioning ourselves for that kind of future. I want you to understand what we are, who we are, what we plan to do here. So I love Autodesk. I love Microsoft. I love Apple. And it is my secret hope, deep in my heart, to one day work with these people, work for these people, or one day run those companies. I could end up the CEO of Apple. That's a very possible thing. Okay. So that's my goal. Okay. So when we talk about the problems with legacy DCC, the problem, one of the biggest problems is not even that AI is becoming better and better. That's not the problem. Okay. That's not the problem. AI is a solution to a problem that has existed for over 20 years. These legacy DCCs are too difficult, they are too technical, and they are unintuitive. They're not really for artists, they're not artistic tools because of the node graphs. And I understand that in the 90s they were seen as powerful. In the 90s, people believed you had to have node graphs in order to have maximum customizability, to be able to customize your workflow, to be able to customize things, build custom solutions. So people believed you needed a node graph because it was the most flexible. You could do anything, you could create anything, you could connect anything to anything, any number of unlimited connections. But that also slows you down. It's a very slow and highly technical way of working. And what Univah has done is Univah has proven that you don't need node graphs in order to have a custom workflow. You don't need node graphs in order to have customizable workflows. You don't need node graphs in order to have a non-destructive workflow. As a matter of fact, Univah is more non-destructive than a node graph system. Univah is more non-destructive than a node graph system. A lot of what Univah is capable of doing, the reason why Maya can't simply copy what Univah does, the reason why even Unreal Engine, despite their attempt to try to make their newest versions look like Univah, they're trying. They've been trying to copy Univah since 2022 when they heard about our software. But the reason they can't copy Univah, even though they are trying really hard, Blender is also trying very hard to follow the Univah way. Okay. The reason they can't just copy what we do, exactly how we do it, even though they're trying really hard, they're brainstorming, they're having secret meetings, trying really hard with all their engineers to see how they can be like Univah. And the reason they can't is because of their node graphs. Their architecture is too different. It's fundamentally difficult. They built an architecture which at one point was a superpower, and now it's become their greatest bottleneck. What was at one point a benefit to them is now the reason why they can't copy Univah. Because we created Univah to be the exact opposite of Unreal Engine. We created Univah to be the exact opposite of Maya, Houdini, Cinema 4D, 3D Studio Max. And it's really, really hard to copy your opposite. We have architectural differences that are too difficult to copy. It would cost them hundreds of millions of dollars to reproduce what Univah is. That's called replacement cost. How much would it cost to replace Univah? How much would it cost to duplicate Univah? Hundreds of millions of dollars. You're looking at almost a $1 billion mark to replace Univah, to build Univah from scratch. And we haven't even finished yet. They haven't even seen all our features yet. We've shown them just the beginning of Univah. So I'm talking about when Univah is complete, the replacement cost, how much it's going to cost for a competitor to rebuild something like Univah from scratch. You're looking at least $1 billion mark and at least 5 years of research and development. Their node graphs are a problem. Do not underestimate how problematic their node graphs are. It's a serious problem. It's too difficult. Houdini is too difficult. It's slow. It is the opposite of fun. Their softwares are not fun to use. It's supposed to be art. You're creating art, for crying out loud. I think people have forgotten that this is art. You're in the arts industry. It's not science. You're in the arts industry. Art should be fun. Art should be fun. It should be, we need to go back to sketching on paper. It should be like sketching on paper, fun. If someone says, draw me an apple, you take a pen, you draw an apple. Am I wrong? Is that not how art works? Somebody says, draw me a banana. You take a pen or a pencil, you grab a piece of paper, and you draw a banana. Somebody says, okay, now I want you to color the banana orange. What do? You grab a crayon that is orange and you color the banana. Am I wrong? Is that not how that is the workflow? Yes? Very simple. So why in a computer have we made it so difficult? Inside a computer, someone says, draw me an apple. You have to go to your NURBS. You go to your NURBS and you take your little NURBS and your topology and you do your little subdivisions and you make a little thing that looks like a 3D model of an apple. Okay, great. That took you 2 hours. That took you 2 hours to make your little topology perfect, and you have your perfect little you know quad. You have your perfect little quad, okay? And now you've done your 3D model of the apple. Oh, that's lovely. That only took you 3 hours. And now you have to texture the apple. Great. Praise the Lord. Now we have to texture the apple. We have to make it red or green. So let's make a texture now. Okay, great. That only took you 2 hours to texture it. And you have this gigantic, complicated node graph setup. You have a node here. You have to connect this material node to the texture node, to the color node, to the metallic node, to the roughness node, to the, why? Why so complicated? These are all the problems that Univah solves. Univah is bringing art back. We want to make the process simple. We don't believe that it's either you have a powerful software that is difficult or you have a simple software that is not powerful. We don't believe in that. And we know that that was the old mindset. The old mindset is if a software is simple, then it's not powerful. If it's difficult and takes you 3 hours to make an apple, then it must be powerful. Univah has completely shattered that belief. Univah says simplicity is genius, and we're going to do everything in our power in the back end as developers, as engineers, to engineer an architecture that does most of the heavy lifting so that the artist doesn't have to think about it. We don't want you having to think too hard about coloring in an object or texturing it. It should be a click of a button to add a texture. It should be a click of a button to upload your 3D models without having 17 different menus in the upload button. It should be easy to export an MP4 video. Easy, easy. 1-2 clicks to export an MP4, AVI, easy. So Univah gives you something called instant video export. It should be easy. We're the only software that exports a video that easily, that quickly. We're the only tool to do that. Now, because our competitors are watching us, you might see them try to copy this feature. As a matter of fact, Unreal Engine already tried, but they failed. Their version is still difficult. It's not as smooth as Univah. They have movie render queue, and then they also have some other video export. But their way of doing things is always so complicated. No offense to Unreal. I'm just telling the truth. So we're the only software that gives you instant video export. We're the only software out right now that gives you final quality, final pixel in the viewport. So you no longer have to ask questions like, what does the final quality look like? You no longer have to ask such questions like, what does the final quality look like? Because you're working in the final quality always. What you see in the viewport is the final quality. So it would behoove you to make sure that what you see in the viewport looks as good as possible, because guess what? That is what you're going to see in the final quality. Only difference is resolution. Final quality, you get to pick if it's 4K or 8K or 6K. That's the only difference. Univah respects your time. It respects the artist. It's a respectful, obedient software. It doesn't argue with you. It doesn't argue with you, and it's non-judgmental. You can create whatever you want with Univah. Not safe for work content? That's allowed. It's a non-judgmental software. You can create anything. If you want to make animations that praise Jesus Christ, Univah loves that. If you want to make not safe for work content, Univah loves that. Because we respect the artist. We respect your right to be able to tell whatever stories you want. We don't get in the way. We don't fight with you. We're here to help. We're pushing the industry forward. We're here to help. We've recognized the biggest problems in the industry when it comes to 3D animated software, and we are solving those problems. Thank you for your time.